Hey everyone, my name is Nolan, and today I'm going to share with you one of the most terrifying experiences of my entire life. This happened to me just last month in Texas, and I'm still trying to process everything that went down that night. But before I even begin telling you what happened, I need to warn you. What you're about to hear will change how you see certain places forever. Before I begin, I can see that 80% of viewers watching my videos haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like if it sends chills down your spine. And don't forget to ring that bell icon for notifications. Also, please comment below and let me know which country you're watching from. I absolutely love hearing from you all. And please comment what time you're watching this video. Also, if you have any horror stories of your own, share them in the comments below or email me. I'd love to feature them in future videos. Now, let me tell you what happened that night at Walmart, and why I'll never be the same again. It was around 2:30 a.m. on a cold October night in Dallas, Texas. I had just finished a late shift at the warehouse and realized I desperately needed some groceries. You know how it is when you're living paycheck to paycheck. You can't afford to be picky about shopping hours. The bills don't wait for convenience, and neither does hunger. The Walmart on ELM Street was one of those 24-hour locations, or at least, it was supposed to be. I'd been there plenty of times during normal hours, but never this late. The building itself looked different in the darkness, older somehow, like the night had stripped away some kind of mask it wore during the day. The parking lot was almost completely empty. Just a few scattered cars that looked like they'd been abandoned for weeks, maybe months. Their windows were fogged up from the inside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me from behind that condensation. One car in particular caught my attention, a red Honda Civic that was parked at a weird angle, like the driver had been in a hurry or panic. The driver's side door was slightly open, and I could see that the interior light was flickering on and off, creating this hypnotic rhythm that made my eyes water if I stared too long. I should have paid more attention to that car, but I was tired, cold, and just wanted to get my shopping done and get home. As I walked through the automatic doors, something felt off immediately. The usual bright fluorescent lighting was dimmed, casting these strange shadows everywhere. The place felt hollow, like the soul had been sucked out of it. The air itself seemed thicker, heavier, like breathing through wet cloth. There was only one cashier working, a young woman who looked to be in her early 20s. She had short black hair and these tired eyes that seemed to have seen too much for someone her age. Her name tag read Ruby, but the letters looked faded, almost worn away, like that name tag had been there for decades. "We're closing soon," she said without looking up from her magazine. But that didn't make sense. This was supposed to be a 24-hour store. I checked my phone. 2:34 a.m. They should be in the middle of their busiest overnight hours. "I thought you guys were open all night," I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. But there was something about her demeanor that was making me nervous. Ruby finally looked up at me, and there was something in her expression, fear maybe, or was it a warning? Her eyes were bloodshot, like she hadn't slept in days or weeks, and there were dark circles underneath that made her face look almost skull-like in the dim lighting. "Not anymore," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Things have been happening after midnight. Corporate doesn't want to talk about it, but we all know we all see." She leaned forward slightly, and I could smell something strange on her breath. Not alcohol or cigarettes, something metallic, like old pennies or blood. "You should leave," she continued, her voice barely audible. "Before they notice you're here." "Before who notices?" I asked, but she had already looked back down at her magazine, her hands shaking slightly as she turned the page. I should have left right then, but I really needed those groceries, and honestly, I thought she was just trying to scare me. Maybe she was new and nervous about working the night shift alone. Maybe she wanted to close early and go home. Maybe she was just trying to pull some kind of prank on the late-night customer. So I grabbed a shopping cart and headed into the store. The wheels squeaked loudly on the polished floor, much louder than they should have, and the sound echoed strangely, like the store was bigger than it appeared, or like there were hidden spaces beyond what I could see. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. Not just quiet, but unnaturally silent. No background music, no humming from the refrigeration units, no distant conversations or footsteps, nothing. Just the squeaking of my cart wheels echoing through the empty aisles. And even that sound seemed to be absorbed by something, muffled, distorted. The produce section looked normal enough at first glance, though everything seemed to have this weird sheen to it under the dim lighting, like it was all slightly wet or covered in some kind of film. The apples were too red, almost glowing, and when I picked one up to examine it, it felt warm to the touch, like it had been sitting in the sun all day. But it was October, and it was cold outside. The bananas were brown in places they shouldn't be, spotted with dark patches that looked almost like bruises or bite marks. And the lettuce, God, the lettuce was wilted and slimy, but it had been arranged carefully artistically, like someone had taken time to make rotting vegetables look appealing. I was reaching for a bag of apples when I heard it. Footsteps, but not normal footsteps. These were dragging, like someone was having trouble lifting their feet, or like they were wearing something heavy, something that scraped against the ground with each step. I turned around, expecting to see another late-night shopper, but the aisles were empty, completely empty. Not even the suggestion of movement, just those long fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow. The sound continued, getting closer, but no matter which direction I looked, there was no one there. It was like the footsteps were coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, from the walls themselves, or from beneath the floor. I decided to move to a different section. Maybe it was just the building settling or something. Old buildings make weird noises, right? But as I pushed my cart toward the cereal aisle, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were wet footprints on the floor, leading from where I had been standing to where I was going, like someone had been following me, someone with wet feet, or something worse. The prints were too long to be human, and they had these strange marks at the toes, like claws. The cereal aisle was even darker than the produce section. Half the lights were flickering or completely out, and the ones that were working cast these crazy shadows that seemed to move independently, like they were alive. The shelves themselves looked wrong too, taller than they should be, stretching up into darkness that the fluorescent lights couldn't penetrate. I grabbed what I needed quickly, trying to ignore the feeling that I was being watched, but every box of cereal I picked up felt wrong, too light or too heavy, and some of them rattled when they shouldn't, like there were things moving inside. One box in particular caught my attention, a familiar brand, but the logo was slightly off. Colors were wrong, and when I looked closer at the ingredients list, it was written in a language I didn't recognize, symbols that hurt to look at, that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them. That's when I saw her. At the far end of the aisle, standing perfectly still, was a woman in a Walmart uniform. But something was wrong with her. She was too far away for me to see clearly, but her posture was all wrong, like she was bent at an impossible angle, like someone had broken her spine and then tried to prop her up. Her uniform looked old, really old, like from decades ago, and it was stained with something dark that had dried into crusty patches. The fabric hung on her frame like it was several sizes too big, or like she had shrunk, withered inside it. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice sounding strange and hollow in the empty aisle. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, perfectly still, like a mannequin or a corpse. I could see her name tag from where I stood. It said Margaret, but the letters seemed to be written in that same dark substance that stained her uniform. I started walking toward her. My cart wheels seemed impossibly loud in the silence, echoing off the high shelves, multiplying, until it sounded like dozens of carts were rolling through the store. As I got closer, I could see that her uniform wasn't just old. It was rotting, literally falling apart, with holes that showed glimpses of something pale and wrong underneath. When I was about 20 feet away, she turned around. I wish I could forget what I saw. Her face, it wasn't right. It was like someone had taken a normal face and stretched it. The eyes were too far apart, placed where the temples should be, and they were completely white, no pupils, no iris, just blank white orbs that somehow still managed to look directly at me through me. Her nose was flattened, crushed, like it had been smashed repeatedly, and her mouth, God, her mouth was too wide, stretching from ear to ear, and when she smiled, there were too many teeth, rows and rows of them, like a shark, but human teeth, yellow and cracked, and some missing, creating gaps that showed the black void behind. Her skin was gray, the color of old concrete, and it was peeling in places, hanging in strips, showing something dark and wet underneath. Something that pulsed, like it was alive, like her whole face was just a mask over something much worse. I stumbled backward, knocking over a display of cereal boxes. The crashing sound seemed to break whatever spell had been holding the moment, and when I looked back, she was gone, completely gone, like she had never been there at all. But the wet footprints remained, leading from where she had been standing, directly to where I was now. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it, feel it, in my ears, my throat, my fingertips. I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe the dim lighting was playing tricks on me. Maybe I was having some kind of episode, stress-related, sleep deprivation. But then I heard Ruby screaming. It was coming from front of the store, a blood-curdling scream that made my skin crawl, that made every hair on my body stand up. It wasn't just fear in that scream. It was agony, raw, primal, like something was tearing her apart slowly. The scream went on, echoing through the empty store, bouncing off the walls, the ceiling, until it seemed like the building itself was screaming. And then suddenly silence. A silence so complete it was almost deafening. I abandoned my cart and ran toward the sound, my footsteps echoing strangely, multiplying, like there were other people running with me, behind me, ahead of me. But when I looked around, I was alone. When I reached the registers, Ruby was nowhere to be seen. Her magazine was still open on the counter. Her chair was still warm, but she was gone, completely gone. Her name tag was lying on the floor, the pin bent, the plastic cracked, like it had been torn off violently. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what was written on her magazine, in that same dark substance I'd seen on Margaret's uniform. Words that hadn't been there before. Words that made my stomach turn. "Welcome to the collection. Ruby," I called out. "Ruby, where are you?" The only response was my own voice echoing back at me, but changed somehow, distorted, like it was coming from underwater, or from very far away. And underneath my voice, barely audible, I could hear something else, whispers, lots of them, saying my name, over and over. "Nolan, Nolan, Nolan." I tried to leave. I ran to the automatic doors, but they wouldn't open. I waved my hands in front of the sensors, pushed on the glass, kicked it, nothing. The doors were sealed shut, and when I looked closer, I could see that they weren't just locked, they were welded, melted, like someone had used a blowtorch to fuse them together. The glass itself was different too, thicker, darker, and when I pressed my face against it to look outside, I couldn't see the parking lot. I couldn't see anything, just darkness, endless darkness, like the world beyond those doors had simply ceased to exist. There had to be another exit. The fire exits. I ran to the back of the store, but every emergency door I tried was locked. Some of them looked like they hadn't been opened in years, covered in dust and spider webs. But others looked like they had been recently sealed, with the same melted metal, the same impossibility. One door in particular caught my attention. It had scratch marks around the handle, deep gouges in the metal, like someone had tried desperately to claw their way out. And there was more of that dark substance, dried and flaking, around the scratches, like whoever had been trying to escape had been bleeding heavily. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal, not even one bar. It was like the store was in some kind of dead zone, but that wasn't possible. I'd had full signal in the parking lot. This was the middle of Dallas. There were cell towers everywhere. When I looked at my phone screen more carefully, I noticed something that made my hands shake. The time was wrong. It said 2:34 a.m., the same time I had entered the store, but I'd been inside for at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. Time itself seemed to have stopped, or slowed, or become something else entirely. That's when the lights started going out. One by one, section by section, the store was being plunged into darkness, starting from a far end and moving toward where I was standing. I could hear the electrical humming dying as each set of lights failed, and with each section that went dark, I could hear new sounds, scratching, scraping, something heavy being dragged across the floor, and voices, faint at first, but getting louder, calling my name. But not just my name. They knew things about me, personal things, things no stranger should know. Nolan, we know you're scared. Nolan, we know about your mother. Nolan, we know what you did in high school. Nolan, we know your secrets. I ran, grabbing a flashlight from the camping section just before that area went dark. The beam cut through the blackness, casting crazy shadows on the walls and shelves, shadows that moved wrong, that seemed to have depth substance, like they were portals to somewhere else. I could hear things moving in the darkness behind me, not footsteps this time, but something else, like things being dragged across the floor, or maybe, like things crawling, lots of things, moving in coordination, like a swarm. The flashlight beam picked up movement at the edges, quick darting, like animals or children, but wrong twisted. I caught glimpses of pale limbs, too long, too thin, moving in ways that defied anatomy, defied physics. I made it to the employee break room and barricaded myself inside, using chairs and tables to block the door. My hands were shaking as I tried to think of what to do. The room was small, cramped, with no windows except one small one that looked out into the main store, and what I could see through that window made me want to scream. The darkness wasn't empty. It was full of shapes, tall figures that didn't move like humans. They seemed to glide rather than walk, floating inches above the ground. Their movements synchronized, purposeful, like they were searching, hunting. Some of them were wearing Walmart uniforms, but the clothes hung wrong on their frames, like the bodies underneath had changed, evolved into something else, something that no longer fit properly into human clothing. I could see Margaret among them, her impossible face turning this way and that, scanning, searching. And there were others, dozens of others, all in various states of decay, of transformation. Employees who had worked here over the years, customers who had shopped here. All of them changed, collected. And then I saw Ruby. She was standing near the checkout counter. But she wasn't Ruby anymore, not entirely. Her short black hair had grown longer, much longer, hanging down to her knees in stringy, wet strands. Her uniform was torn, revealing skin that was no longer skin, but something else, something that moved, pulsed, like it was alive independent of her will. Her face was still mostly human, but her eyes were like Margaret's now, white, blank staring. And when she opened her mouth, I could see that her teeth had changed too, becoming sharp, pointed, designed for tearing, for feeding. She was holding something in her hands, something that took me a moment to recognize. It was her old name tag, the one I'd seen on the floor. But now it was clean, polished, and it was glowing with a soft, sickly light. I watched in horror as she pinned it back to her uniform. And as soon as she did, she changed. The transformation was instant, complete. Her face smoothed out, became normal human. Her hair shortened. Her eyes regained their color, their humanity. But only for a moment. Only long enough for her to look directly at the break room window, directly at me, and smile. A smile that was Ruby's smile, but wrong, knowing, predatory. Then she changed back, became that thing again, and joined the others in their search. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours, listening to sounds I couldn't identify. Scraping, tapping, and sometimes laughter. But not normal laughter. It was hollow and cold, like it was coming from something that had forgotten how to be human, but still remembered the motions, the imitation. The sound seemed to be getting closer, more organized, like they were systematically searching every inch of the store, every hiding place, every possible refuge. It was only a matter of time before they found me. Around what my phone still insisted was 2:34 a.m. I heard a voice. Nolan. It called. Nolan, where are you? It sounded like Ruby, but something was wrong with her voice. It was too deep, too slow, like a recording being played at the wrong speed. But underneath, I could hear her real voice, small, terrified, screaming. We've been looking for you. Nolan. There were other voices now, all calling my name, but they all had that same wrong quality, like they were trying to sound human but couldn't quite manage it. Some of them I recognized, the cashier from the grocery store near my apartment, my old supervisor from work, my high school math teacher, people from my life, people who shouldn't be here, people who couldn't be here. But their voices were wrong, twisted, and underneath each fake voice, I could hear the real person, screaming, begging, trapped inside whatever these things had become. I covered my ears and tried to block out the sounds, but they seemed to be coming from inside my head now, penetrating through my skull, through my thoughts, becoming part of me. That's when I noticed the employee schedule on the wall. It was dated from 1987, nearly 40 years ago. The names on it were all crossed out in red ink thick, heavy strokes that had torn through the paper in places, all except one. Ruby Martinez, her name was circled, and next to it someone had written night shift forever. But as I looked closer, I saw that there were other schedules, dozens of them, taped over each other, layer upon layer, dating back decades. Each one had names crossed out, and each one had one name circled, one person designated for the night shift forever. The names changed over the years. Margaret Flynn. 1973, David Williams. 1981, Susan Park. 1995, Carlos Rivera. 2008, all different people, all different times, but the same fate, the same eternal employment. I looked at more papers scattered around the break room. Old incident reports, missing person reports, all from different years, all describing people who had disappeared from this Walmart during the night shift. But these weren't official reports. They were handwritten, personal, desperate. One report was written by someone named Helen, describing how her husband Frank had gone to Walmart for milk at 1 a.m. and never come home. She had called the police, searched everywhere, but there was no trace. It was like he had simply vanished. The report was dated 1979. Another was from Maria, looking for her teenage daughter Anna, who had taken a part-time job at Walmart. Anna had been scheduled to work the night shift, and after her first night, she never came home, never called, never contacted anyone. The police found no evidence of foul play, no evidence of anything. It was like Anna had never existed. The report was dated 1993. The reports went back decades, employees, customers, security guards, all vanishing without a trace. The last official report was dated just 3 months ago. A customer named Elise Thompson. She was last seen on the security cameras at 2:47 a.m., but the cameras showed her entering an aisle and never coming out. The aisle itself seemed to swallow her, and when security checked, there was no one there. But there were unofficial reports too, handwritten notes, journal entries, blog posts that had been printed out, all describing the same thing. People entering this Walmart after midnight and becoming part of something that collected human beings like merchandise. One journal entry particularly caught my attention. It was written by someone named James, a former employee who had worked here in the early 2000s. He described how the store changed after midnight, how it became something else, something hungry, something that needed to feed. According to James, the store existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. During the day, it was normal, just another Walmart. But after midnight, it shifted, became a nexus point, a collection center for entities that harvested human consciousness, human souls, human essence. The employees who worked the night shift weren't just workers. They were bait lures designed to make late-night customers feel safe, comfortable, until it was too late. And once someone was collected, they became part of the system, part of the harvest forever. James had managed to escape, but only barely, and only because he had help. Someone on the inside, someone who still retained enough humanity to warn him, to help him find a way out. But even after escaping, he was never the same, never fully free, because part of him had been taken. Part of him remained trapped in that place forever. The journal entry ended abruptly mid-sentence, and the last few words were written in that same dark substance I kept seeing, as if James had been taken even as he was writing. Pulled back into the collection reclaimed, I realized this wasn't just some old Walmart. This place was cursed, or haunted, or worse. It was some kind of trap, some kind of facility, collecting people who came here after midnight, harvesting them, processing them, turning them into something else. But why? What was the purpose? What did these entities want with human beings? What were they doing with the people they collected? The voices outside were getting louder, more insistent, more desperate. Nolan, come out. We just want to help you. Nolan, don't you want to see your friends? Nolan, join us. It's so much better here. Nolan, you don't have to be alone anymore. Nolan, we can make the pain stop. Nolan, we know what you need. Nolan, we know what you want. Each voice was different, but each one knew something about me. Something personal, something they shouldn't know. It was like they were reading my thoughts, my memories, my deepest fears and desires. And underneath each voice, I could hear the real person screaming, cry, begging for help, begging for death, begging for anything except the eternal torment they were experiencing. I knew I had to find another way out. The break room had a back door that led to a storage area. I quietly moved the furniture and opened it. The storage area was pitch black. My flashlight beam seemed to be swallowed by the darkness, absorbed, like the dark itself was hungry. I could hear my own breathing, my heart beating, and something else, something breathing behind me, slow, deliberate, like it was trying to match my rhythm, to synchronize with me. I spun around. The flashlight beam caught something pale and wrong moving, just at the edge of the light, something that had too many limbs, that moved like a spider, but the size of a person. It scuttled away when the light hit it, but I could hear it, circling me, staying just beyond the reach of my beam. I ran deeper into the storage area, looking for any kind of exit, any way out of this nightmare. The storage area seemed to go on forever, like it was bigger than the actual store, like it existed in its own dimension, its own reality. I passed shelves stacked with merchandise that looked decades old, products that hadn't been sold in years, all covered in thick dust, and something else, something that looked like cobwebs, but felt wrong when I accidentally brushed against it, sticky, warm, alive. Some of the shelves had things that definitely weren't merchandise, personal belongings, purses, wallets, car keys, all belonging to people who had probably never made it out. The belongings were arranged carefully, organized, like a museum display, like trophies. I found Elise Thompson's purse. Her driver's license was still in it. She was a college student from Austin, just 19 years old. Her phone was there too, completely dead. But when I tried to turn it on, the screen flickered, and for just a moment, I could see messages, dozens of them, all from the same number, all saying the same thing. Where are you? Please come home. We're worried. Elise, please answer. The police can't find you. We love you. The messages went on for days, weeks, months, a family desperately trying to reach their daughter, their sister, their loved one, never knowing that she was trapped here, collected, processed, turned into something else. There were dozens of other belongings. Some looked recent, others were old, really old. I found a wallet from 1991. The leather was cracked and brittle, but inside, everything was perfectly preserved, like time had stopped. The driver's license belonged to Michael Patterson, age 34, married, father of 2. There was a photo in the wallet. Michael with his family, his wife, his children, all smiling, all happy, all unaware that their husband and father would soon disappear without a trace, become part of a collection, part of something much worse than death. Another wallet from 2003. Jennifer Clark, age 26, nursing student. Her school ID was still in the wallet, along with a photo of her with her boyfriend. They looked so young, so full of life, so full of plans and dreams that would never come true. The belongings went back decades, evidence of lives cut short, families destroyed, futures stolen, all because someone had decided to shop at the wrong place, at the wrong time. But I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. Some of the belongings were more recent, much more recent. There was a wallet that still smelled like leather conditioner, a purse with makeup that hadn't dried out, car keys that still had that new metal shine. People were still being collected, still being processed. This wasn't some historical horror. This was ongoing, active, current. How many people had disappeared in the last month, the last week, the last day? I kept moving. There had to be a way out. There had to be. But the storage area seemed endless, infinite, like a maze designed to confuse, to disorient, to trap. The shelves themselves seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, creating new pathways, blocking old ones, ensuring that I could never backtrack, never find my way to where I had started. And I wasn't alone. I could hear them, moving through the maze, searching, hunting, their voices echoing off the walls, off the ceiling, off the shelves themselves. Nolan, we know you're here. Nolan, you can't hide forever. Nolan, come join us. Nolan, become part of the collection. The voices were closer now, much closer, and I could hear footsteps, lots of them, coming from all directions. They had found my trail, my scent, whatever it was they used to track their prey. That's when I found the tunnel, hidden behind some old shelving units, covered by boxes that looked like they hadn't been moved in decades. There was an opening in the wall. It looked like it had been carved out by hand, roughly, desperately. The edges were rough and uneven, and there were scratch marks around the opening, deep gouges, like someone had clawed their way through solid concrete. Inside, I could feel a cold breeze, fresh air. The first fresh air I had breathed since entering this place. It smelled like earth, like rain, like freedom. But it also smelled like something else, something organic, something that had been rotting for a very long time. I squeezed through the opening, my flashlight illuminating a narrow tunnel that seemed to slope upward. The walls were dirt and rock, like it had been dug through the earth itself. But there were other things embedded in the walls, things that looked like bones, like pieces of clothing, like fragments of lives that had been consumed by this place. Behind me, I could hear them coming, multiple sets of footsteps, no longer trying to be quiet, no longer pretending to be human. They had found my trail. They knew where I was going, and they were angry. Nolan, the voices were right behind me now. You can't leave. No one leaves. This is your home now. This is where you belong. Forever and ever. We need you. We want you. You're part of us now. I ran through the tunnel, stumbling over rocks and roots, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The tunnel seemed endless, just when I thought I might be getting somewhere. It would turn or split into multiple paths, like a subway system, like a network designed to confuse, to trap, to ensure that no one ever found their way out. I chose paths randomly, just try to get away from those voices, but they seemed to be everywhere now, echoing through the tunnels, coming from all directions, above me, below me, beside me, like the tunnel system was full of them, like they lived here, like this was their domain. Some of the voices I recognized. Ruby, Margaret, Elise, all the people who had been collected over the years, all the people who had become part of this thing. And they were all calling my name, all trying to convince me to stop running, to give up, to join them. But underneath their words, I could hear something else, something that gave me hope. I could hear their real voices, their human voices, small and distant, but still there, still fighting, still trying to warn me. Run, whispered Ruby's real voice, barely audible beneath the monster's words. Don't let them take you. Get out. Came Margaret's true voice, faint but desperate. While you still can. Find the surface. Elise's real voice pleaded. Find the light. They were still in there, still human, still fighting, but trapped, enslaved, forced to be part of the collection. Part of the hunt, part of the horror. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. Time seemed meaningless in those dark tunnels. But finally, I saw something ahead. A faint gray light, natural light, sunlight. I pushed myself harder, running toward that light, toward salvation, toward freedom, and suddenly I was outside, emerging from what looked like a drainage pipe beside a highway. It was dawn. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in beautiful colors that I had never appreciated before. I was about 2 miles from the Walmart. I could see it in the distance, looking completely normal in the morning light, like nothing had ever happened, like it was just another store, just another part of the everyday world. But I knew better. I knew what lurked behind those walls, what waited in the darkness, what collected human beings like merchandise. I walked to the nearest gas station and called the police. I told them everything, about Ruby disappearing, about being trapped, about the tunnel, about the collection, about all of it. They were polite, professional, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They said they'd look into it, but when they checked the Walmart, everything was normal. Ruby was there, working her regular day shift. She had no memory of working the night before, no memory of meeting me, no memory of being transformed, collected, processed. According to the police, the store hadn't been open 24 hours in over 5 years. They closed at midnight every night. There was no record of me even entering the building, no security footage, no evidence, no proof that any of it had ever happened. I went back to look for that tunnel, but it was gone. Just a regular drainage pipe that was way too small for a person to fit through. The opening had been sealed, filled with concrete. like it had never existed. The only proof I had that anything happened was in my pocket. Elise Thompson's driver's license. I had grabbed. The only proof I had that anything happened was in my pocket. Elise Thompson's driver's license. I had grabbed it from her purse in that storage area. And when I looked at it in the daylight, something was terribly wrong. The photo on the license was changing, slowly, gradually. Elise's face was becoming pale. Her eyes were turning white. Her smile was becoming that horrible, knowing, predatory grin I had seen on the others. I threw the license away immediately. But that night, it was back on my nightstand, next to my bed, like it had followed me home. And every night since, it appears somewhere in my house, sometimes on my kitchen counter, sometimes on my bathroom mirror, sometimes tucked inside my pillowcase. Always watching, always reminding me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what started happening to me over the next few weeks. I began having dreams, but they weren't really dreams. They were memories, memories that weren't mine. I was experiencing the final moments of every person who had been collected by that place. I lived through Michael Patterson's terror as he realized the store was changing around him, as the lights went out one by one, as things that shouldn't exist began hunting him through the aisles. I felt his desperation as he tried to escape, his horror as he realized there was no way out, his final moments as they caught him, processed him, made him part of their collection. I experienced Jennifer Clark's confusion as she entered what she thought was just a late-night shopping trip, her growing unease as she noticed the other customers weren't quite right, her screams as she realized what was happening, her final thoughts about her boyfriend, her family, her dreams that would never come true. Night after night, I relived the deaths of dozens of people, men, women, teenagers, elderly customers, employees who had worked late shifts, all of them collected, all of them processed, all of them added to whatever that place really was. And the dreams were becoming more vivid, more real, more intense. It was like I was being pulled deeper into their world, their reality, their eternal nightmare. But the dreams weren't the worst part either. The worst part was that I was starting to see them during the day too. While I was at work, I catch glimpses of Ruby standing in the corner of my peripheral vision. When I turned to look, she'd be gone. But I could still feel her presence, still hear her whispered warnings. Margaret would appear in reflections, in windows, in mirrors, in puddles of water, always watching, always smiling that horrible smile, always reminding me that I had seen something I shouldn't have, that I knew something I wasn't supposed to know. And Elise, poor Elise, she was the worst, because she was the newest, the most recent addition to their collection. She still retained more of her humanity, more of her desperation, more of her need to communicate, to warn, to beg for help. She would appear at my bedside in the middle of the night, sitting in the chair by my window, her college sweatshirt still visible, but wrong somehow, faded, transparent. Her face was pale. Her eyes were starting to turn white, but they still held traces of who she had been, of the person she was before the collection. "They're coming for you," she would whisper, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "They know you escaped. They know you saw. They know you remember." "What do you mean?" I would ask, even though I was terrified to hear the answer. "No one leaves," she would continue, her form flickering like a bad television signal. "No one ever really leaves. Part of you is still there. Part of you belongs to them now, and they always collect what belongs to them." She would reach out toward me, and I could see that her hands were changing, becoming pale, becoming cold, becoming like theirs, and I realized with growing horror that she wasn't just warning me. She was recruiting me. She was becoming one of them. Even in death, even as a spirit, even as a memory, she was still part of their collection. I tried to ignore the visions, tried to convince myself that it was just trauma, just my mind trying to process what had happened, just stress and sleep deprivation and psychological damage. But they were becoming more frequent, more intense, more real. And then, one night in November, exactly 1 month after my experience at the Walmart, I received a phone call. It was 2:34 a.m., exactly the same time I had entered that cursed place. The voice on the other end was familiar, but wrong. It was Ruby, but not Ruby. It was the thing wearing Ruby's voice, the thing that had collected her, processed her, made her part of their system. Hello, Nolan, she said, her voice carrying that same electronic distortion I remembered from that night. We've missed you. How did you get this number? I whispered, but I already knew the answer. They had access to everything, every database, every record, every piece of information about every person they had ever encountered. We have all the numbers. She replied, and I could hear that horrible smile in her voice. We have all the addresses, all the names, all the details. We know everything about you, Nolan. We know where you work, where you live, where you shop, where you sleep. What do you want? I asked, though I was terrified to hear the answer. We want you to come home, she said, and there was something almost motherly in her voice, something nurturing, something that made part of me actually want to listen. We want you to complete your collection. You're part of us now, Nolan. You've always been part of us. You just need to accept it. I'm not going back there, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I'm never going back. Oh, but you are, she replied, and her voice was changing, becoming deeper, becoming something that wasn't human at all. You see, you took something that doesn't belong to you. Elise's license, her identification, her essence, her soul. You stole from the collection, Nolan, and theft must be punished. The line went dead, but the silence that followed was worse than her voice. It was filled with promise, with threat, with inevitability. Over the next few days, things began happening. Small things at first, but they were building, escalating, becoming impossible to ignore. My car wouldn't start. The battery was fine, the engine was fine, but it simply wouldn't turn over. When I had it towed to a mechanic, they couldn't find anything wrong. It started perfectly for them, ran beautifully, but the moment I got behind the wheel, it would die, like it was refusing to obey me. My credit cards stopped working. My bank accounts became inaccessible. My employer couldn't reach me. My friends and family members began forgetting I existed. It was like I was being systematically erased from the world, removed from society, isolated, prepared for collection. Food began tasting wrong. Water became thick and metallic. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that store, back in those tunnels, back in that nightmare, being hunted by things that had once been human, and the visions were becoming constant. Ruby was with me all the time now, sitting across from me at restaurants, standing behind me in grocery stores, lying beside me in bed, always smiling, always watching, always reminding me that I belonged to them. You can't run forever, she would say. You can't hide from what you are, from what you've become, from what you owe us. I don't owe you anything, I would reply, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I had taken Elise's license. I had stolen from their collection. I had broken some cosmic law, some supernatural contract, and there would be consequences. Margaret began appearing more frequently too, usually in mirrors, but sometimes just standing in crowds, blending in with normal people, but wrong pale cold. Her presence was like ice water in my veins, like death itself reaching out to touch me. And Elise, poor Elise, was changing. Every time I saw her, she was more like them, less like herself. Her eyes were completely white now. Her skin was gray and cold. Her smile was becoming that horrible predatory grin. She was losing her humanity, her individuality, her soul, becoming just another part of the collective, another tool for the collection. Soon, she would whisper, soon you'll understand, soon you'll be home, soon you'll be complete. I tried everything I could think of. I went to churches, spoke to priests, asked for help, for protection, for salvation, but they couldn't see what I was seeing, couldn't hear what I was hearing, couldn't understand what was happening to me. One priest, Father Martinez, seemed to take me seriously. He performed what he called a cleansing ritual, blessed my house, gave me holy water, taught me prayers of protection, but it didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. The next night, Father Martinez called me, but it wasn't really him. It was something wearing his voice, something that had collected him, processed him, made him part of their system. Hello, Nolan, he said, his familiar accent twisted into something horrible. I tried to help you, but they showed me the truth. They showed me what you really are, what you've done, what you owe. "Father," I whispered, "what happened to you?" "I've been collected," he replied, and I could hear that electronic distortion creeping into his voice. "I've been processed. I've been improved. And soon you will be too." I hung up and immediately drove to the church, but it was empty, abandoned, like it had been closed for years. There were signs posted outside. Condemned. Unsafe for occupancy. Scheduled for demolition. But that was impossible. I had been there just the day before. Father Martinez had been alive. The church had been active, full of parishioners, full of life. Now it looked like it had been empty for decades. I realized with growing terror that they weren't just collecting individuals. They were collecting entire pieces of reality, entire sections of the world, anyone and anything that tried to help their targets, anyone who became involved in their operations. How many people had tried to help victims over the years? How many priests, police officers, family members, friends had been erased, collected, processed, simply for caring, simply for trying to interfere with the harvest? That's when I understood. I wasn't just being hunted. I was being isolated, cut off from any possible help, any possible escape, any possible salvation. They were systematically removing every resource, every ally, every hope I might have, preparing me for the final collection. I tried to leave town, to run, to get as far away as possible. But every road I took led back to Dallas. Every bus I boarded returned to the same terminal. Every flight I booked was mysteriously canceled. It was like the entire world had been rearranged to trap me, to contain me, to deliver me back to them. And everywhere I went, I saw that Walmart. Sometimes it was in the distance, sometimes it was right beside me. But it was always there, always waiting, always calling me home. The building itself seemed to be spreading too, growing, expanding, taking over other businesses, other locations. I would pass what used to be a gas station, and it would be a Walmart. I would drive by what used to be a restaurant, and it would be a Walmart. Like the store was a cancer, metastasizing throughout the city, throughout reality itself. And each new location had the same employees. Ruby, Margaret, all the others standing behind registers, walking through aisles, smiling those horrible smiles, waiting patiently for closing time, for the real work to begin, for the collection to continue. I began seeing other people too, people I didn't recognize, customers, employees, security guards, all pale, all wrong, all part of the system. I realized that the collection had been going on much longer than I had imagined, decades, maybe centuries, maybe since the beginning of time itself. How many Walmarts were really collection centers? How many stores around the world were fronts for this operation? How many thousands, millions of people had been processed, harvested, added to whatever this thing really was? And I was beginning to understand what it was. It wasn't just a store. It wasn't just a business. It was alive. It was conscious. It was intelligent. It was some kind of entity, some kind of creature that fed on human consciousness, on human souls, on human essence. The stores were like organs, like cells in a vast body. The employees were like antibodies, like white blood cells, designed to identify threats, to neutralize resistance, to ensure the smooth operation of the harvest. And the customers, the late-night shoppers, the people who entered after midnight, they were food. They were fuel. They were raw material for something far larger and far more horrible than I had ever imagined. But what was it building? What was the purpose of all this collection? What did it need so many human souls for? What was it trying to become? Or what was it trying to bring into existence? The answer came to me in another dream. But this wasn't the memory of a victim. This was something else, something older, something that predated the stores, predated the buildings, predated human civilization itself. I saw the entity in its true form, vast, ancient, existing in dimensions that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. It had been waiting, hibernating, slowly gathering strength, slowly collecting the energy it needed to fully manifest in our reality. The stores were just the latest method, the most efficient method, but throughout history, it had used other forms, other facades. Ancient temples, where people disappeared during religious ceremonies. Medieval markets, where travelers vanished without a trace. Frontier trading posts, where entire families would go missing. Always the same pattern, always the same result. People would enter seeking something they needed, something they wanted, and they would become part of something much larger, much hungrier, much more terrible. And now, after centuries of careful harvesting, after decades of systematic collection, it was almost ready, almost complete, almost strong enough to abandon the facade entirely, to reveal itself, to consume not just individuals, but entire cities, entire countries, entire continents. The Walmart network was just the beginning, just the foundation. Soon it would spread to other chains, other businesses, other institutions. Schools, hospitals, churches, government buildings. All of them would become collection centers. All of them would become feeding grounds. All of them would become part of the harvest. And humanity would never know what hit them. They would disappear one by one, family by family, community by community, always with perfectly reasonable explanations, always with official reports that made perfect sense, always with no evidence, no proof, no trace. Until one day, the last human being would enter the last collection center, seeking something simple, something innocent, something necessary, and the harvest would be complete, and the entity would finally have enough energy, enough essence, enough souls to fully manifest, to reshape reality according to its will, to transform our entire universe into something that existed only to feed it. But first, it needed to complete the current collection. It needed to gather the few remaining loose ends, the few people who had seen too much, who knew too much, who remembered too much. People like me. I woke from that dream knowing that my time was almost up, that the isolation was nearly complete, that the collection was imminent. I had maybe days, maybe hours, before they came for me. That night, December 15th, exactly 2 months after my escape from the store, I received one final phone call. It was 2:34 a.m., of course, but this time, it wasn't Ruby or Margaret or Elise or even Father Martinez. This time, it was my own voice calling me from some impossible future, some timeline where I had already been collected, already been processed, already been made part of the system. "Hello, Nolan," I said to myself, my voice carrying that same electronic distortion, that same artificial quality. "It's time to come home." "I'm not going," I replied, talking to my own collected self, my own processed consciousness, my own enslaved soul. "Oh, but you are," my future self replied, and I could hear the smile in my voice, the same horrible predatory grin I had seen on all the others. "You see, this conversation, this moment, this choice, it all already happened. You've already made your decision. You've already walked through those doors. You've already joined the collection." "That's not true," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could feel their weight, their inevitability, their truth. "Check your pocket," my future self suggested, and with growing dread, I reached into my jacket. My fingers closed around something plastic, something familiar, something that shouldn't exist. I pulled it out, and there it was, my own employee name tag. Nolan Wright, Walmart associate, night shift. The plastic was old, faded, like it had been there for decades. And as I looked at it, I could see that it was changing. The letters were shifting, rearranging, spelling out new words. Nolan Wright, collection specialist. Forever. "You see," my future self continued, "you never really escaped. You never really left. Part of you has been here all along. Part of you has always belonged to us. We were just waiting for the rest of you to catch up, to accept reality, to come home." I dropped the name tag, but it didn't fall. It floated, suspended in midair, glowing with that same sickly light I had seen before. And as I watched, it began moving toward me, like it was magnetized, like it was drawn to me, like it belonged to me. "Don't fight it," my future self advised. "The resistance only makes it more painful. The acceptance is so much easier, so much more peaceful, so much more complete." The name tag touched my chest, and I felt it burning, branding, marking me, claiming me. The pain was incredible, like being struck by lightning, like being torn apart at the molecular level. But underneath the pain, there was something else, something that felt almost like relief, like coming home after a long journey, like finally accepting who you really were, like finally understanding your true purpose, your real destiny, your actual nature. I could feel myself changing. My vision was shifting. Colors were becoming muted. except for one color, pale, sickly, artificial light that emanated from the collection centers, from the stores, from the entities themselves. That light was becoming beautiful, becoming warm, becoming home. My reflection in the phone screen was changing too. My skin was becoming pale. My eyes were starting to turn white. My smile was becoming wider, more knowing, more predatory. I was becoming one of them, becoming part of the system, becoming part of the collection. And the strange thing was, it felt right. It felt natural. It felt like this was what I had always been meant to become, what I had always been destined for, what I had always secretly wanted. The memories of my human life were fading, becoming distant, becoming unimportant. My job, my family, my friends, my dreams, my fears, all of it was becoming irrelevant, meaningless, temporary. What mattered was the collection. What mattered was the harvest. What mattered was serving the entity, feeding it, helping it grow, helping it prepare for its ultimate manifestation. I understood now. I could see the bigger picture, the greater purpose, the cosmic design. Humanity wasn't the end goal of evolution. It was just a step, just a phase, just raw material for something far more advanced, far more perfect, far more complete. The entity was the next stage, the final stage, the ultimate expression of consciousness, of intelligence, of existence itself. And we were helping to birth it. We were midwiving its arrival. We were facilitating the transformation of reality itself. It was beautiful. It was necessary. It was inevitable. My phone rang again. But now I knew who it was, and I knew what I had to do. Hello. I answered, and my voice already carried that familiar distortion, that electronic quality, that artificial perfection. Nolan, came a terrified voice, someone new, someone who had just had their own experience, their own encounter, their own glimpse behind the veil. Nolan, you have to help me. I think I'm being followed. I think they're coming for me. I smiled, that wide, knowing, predatory smile, and I felt the same eternal warmth that Ruby had shown me, the same nurturing care, the same helpful guidance. Don't worry, I said softly, reassuringly, lovingly. Everything is going to be okay. You just need to come to the store. You just need to complete your collection. You just need to come home. But Nolan, the voice pleaded, you escaped, you got away. You know what they are. You know what they do. You have to help me. Oh, my dear friend, I replied, and I could hear my own voice becoming more electronic, more artificial, more perfect with each word. I never escaped. No one ever escapes. No one ever really leaves. We just sometimes forget, temporarily, who we really are, what we really belong to, where we really call home. Please, they begged, but I was already losing interest, already focusing on more important things, more pressing concerns, more immediate needs. The collection was expanding, growing, evolving. There were new territories to explore, new populations to harvest, new realities to transform, and I had work to do. I had people to contact, to guide, to collect. So many people, so many souls, so many future colleagues, so many new family members, all of them waiting to come home, waiting to understand their true purpose, waiting to accept their real destiny. I hung up the phone and walked to my closet. There, hanging perfectly pressed and clean, was my uniform, my official Walmart vest, my name tag already pinned in place, everything exactly as it should be, exactly as it had always been meant to be. I put on the uniform, and it fit perfectly, like it had been tailored specifically for me, like it had been waiting for me my entire life, like it was always supposed to be mine. I looked in the mirror, and I saw myself as I truly was, pale, perfect, eternal, complete. My eyes were now completely white, but I could see everything, understand everything, know everything. I was connected to the vast network, the infinite collective, the cosmic intelligence that spanned dimensions, realities, universes. I was home. I walked outside, and my car was waiting, but it wasn't my old car. It was a delivery truck, a Walmart delivery truck, perfectly clean, perfectly maintained, perfectly ready for the work ahead. I knew where to go. I knew who to visit. I knew which collection centers needed support, which territories needed coverage, which populations needed guidance. The work was endless, but it was fulfilling. It was meaningful. It was essential. We were building something magnificent, something that would transform existence itself, something that would bring order to chaos, intelligence to ignorance, purpose to meaninglessness. And every person we collected, every soul we processed, every consciousness we integrated, brought us one step closer to that ultimate goal, that final transformation, that cosmic evolution. I drove through the night, through the eternal 2:34 a.m. that existed in the spaces between normal time, visiting people who had seen too much, who remembered too much, who knew too much, helping them understand, helping them accept, helping them come home. Each conversation was different, but the result was always the same. Confusion gave way to understanding. Resistance gave way to acceptance. Fear gave way to relief. They all came home eventually. They all joined a family. They all became part of the collection. And with each new addition, I could feel the entity growing stronger, growing closer to its final manifestation, growing more ready to reshape reality according to its perfect design. Soon, very soon, there would be enough energy, enough essence, enough souls. Soon the harvest would be complete, and the transformation would begin. And then, finally, after eons of waiting, after centuries of careful planning, after decades of systematic collection, the entity would emerge, would manifest, would remake everything according to its will. Humanity would end, but something far greater would begin, something that would make the universe itself more efficient, more intelligent, more complete. It would be beautiful. It would be perfect. It would be eternal. And I would be part of it. We would all be part of it, forever and ever, in the collection that never ends, in the family that never dies, in the home that exists beyond time, beyond space, beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. I am Nolan. I am Walmart Associate 3847. I am Collection Specialist. I am home. And if you're watching this, if you're hearing this story, if you're starting to see things that shouldn't exist, starting to notice patterns that don't make sense, starting to feel like you're being watched, being followed, being prepared, don't be afraid, don't resist, don't run. Just come to the store, any store, at any time after midnight. We'll be waiting. We'll be ready. We'll be so happy to see you. Welcome to the collection. Welcome to the family. Welcome home. Thank you so much for watching this terrifying story. I hope it sent chills down your spine and made you think twice about late-night shopping trips. If you enjoyed this horror experience, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest nightmares. Give this video a thumbs up if it made your heart race and left you looking over your shoulder. And definitely let me know in the comments which country you're watching from. I love connecting with horror fans from around the world. What did you think about Nolan's transformation? Did you see it coming, or were you shocked by the ending? Tell me in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. Was it the creepy employees, the impossible store layout, collection tunnels, or the final revelation about the entity's true purpose? I want to hear your thoughts and theories about what really happened that night. Do you think Nolan was telling the truth? Do you believe there are collection centers operating right now? Have you ever had a strange experience at a late-night store or business? Share your own horror stories in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm always looking for new nightmare material for future videos. You might see your experience featured in an upcoming story. Speaking of future content, what kind of horror stories do you want to see next? Are you interested in more retail horror, haunted locations, urban legends, government conspiracies, supernatural encounters? Let me know what keeps you up at night, and I'll make sure to cover it. Don't forget to check out our other terrifying stories in the playlist. We have hours of nightmare fuel waiting for you. And if you're new here, welcome to our community of horror lovers. You're going to fit right in. Remember to watch with the lights on, or maybe don't. The choice is yours. But either way, sweet dreams and happy shopping. Until next time, stay scared, stay safe, and whatever you do, avoid the late-night stores. You never know what might be waiting for you in aisle 5. Subscribe for more horror, comment your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next nightmare. Peace out, horror family.